Right. So thank you very much for uh, attending today's session. And once again, I apologize for the 3-week break. Um, we will continue from where we stopped. So in the last lessons, we spoke that we are all spiritual beings on a humanly journey. In essence, we are a spirit soul, right? And the qualities of the spirit soul, it's full of joy, vitality, it's full of consciousness, clarity, radiance, warmth, compassion, love for others, expressions of gratitude, connection with the Supreme, full of confidence. It's full of balance, beauty, playfulness, fulfillment, and power. There's just no room for fear, right? As far as the spirit soul is concerned. However, due to the conditioning of our past lives and the conditioning of our existing lives, there's a lot of dirt which is actually covering these amazing qualities. And that's the reason why we can't see these qualities. But as we engage more and more in meditation, in mantra chanting, in some of the amazing spiritual activities, then we will realize that this dirt will slowly be removed. This covering of dirt would be removed, and we will then be able to experience, right, the diamond-like qualities of the spirit soul. And we also spoke about happiness. Happiness is not something which, you look out in the material. The happiness as a quality exists within us. We just need to activate this. We are searching for happiness in external things, but external things are temporary. Even if the happiness, if it comes, it might not be of the same magnitude which you have expected. It might come, it might go, or maybe it might not even come, right? So if we rely on the external material to be the source of our happiness, then we will be disappointed. And the scriptures explain that the actual happiness is spiritual happiness, which lies deep within us. Okay. The analogy is this musk deer, right? With the gush of wind, the musk deer goes berserk because he's looking for the source of this amazing musk smell. Right? He's just looking, he's just running around looking for the source, only to then realize that actually it's coming from its own gland. Right? An amazing analogy. And the deepest happiness is actually love. Right? And this love is manifest through service when we serve others, when we experience or when we exude kindness to others, or when we exhibit compassion on others. Right? So this was a summary of what we have been discussing. So, all of us grew up with this false promise of happiness that it's going to be derived from external objects. Right? There's a false promise of happiness. And these lies, they become truth and they become part of our culture. Right? They become the anchoring bias, the consensus bias, our framing bias, and our self-serving bias that happiness actually comes from the material. Right? So this lies becomes truth, it becomes part of our culture, and it becomes tradition. And we need to actively inform ourselves that actually this material is not going to be giving me the happiness. And that's the reason why we keep on going for spiritual retreats, etc. Right? I shared with you that, whenever we buy a new house and we engage in some renovations, the entire process is, it can be quite painful, but we are looking forward to, the final end product, right? We're just so excited about it. We are looking forward to this happiness. But the moment we move in, after a few months, that novelty just wears off. All right. So once again, material happiness, right? It can result in frustration. It could be insubstantial, temporary. That material happiness can also disintegrate. Sometimes the pleasure also comes with pain and anxiety. right? So therefore, happiness cannot just come from material, right? So our aim here, as we are a spirit soul, we cannot only be fulfilled externally, right? We have to be fulfilled with spiritual activities. So, misconceiving our true needs, we wrongly equate our fulfillment and self-worth with possessions, positions, mental and sensual thrills. Let me hide this. Moving window. All right. Okay. So we are often drawn into superficial relationships which hold the promise of lasting satisfaction, yet this leaves us feeling empty. Okay. Let's just take a minute and reflect on a possession which meant the world to us and which has lost meaning altogether right now. Right? There have been many instances where something meant the world to us, but in time to come, it just lost meaning altogether. Right? So that's what the material is all about. So when we face challenges in life, right, this is what the scriptures explain to us. Right? We need to orchestrate our lives in such a way, engaging in meditation, engaging in these spiritual activities, it just gives us so much of fortitude to actually face these challenges, right? And the scriptures explain to us that when we are facing these challenges, it's important for us to learn the art of sometimes being an observer of life and not just being an invested participant, right? And that can actually transform everything. Let's bring this back to the corporate world. Many a times, the sales guys, because they are so invested in wanting to close the deal, they may make some crazy mistakes in giving, and in making it not as attractive to their own organization or not having a fully encompassing deal. So then what happens? Right? You have the manager of these sales folks coming and telling them that, why don't you take a few steps back? Right? Why don't you look at as an external party to this deal? Do you think it's making sense? Right? So that's exactly what we need to do with our own lives. Right? The spirit soul, the quality is it's fearless. But many a times we become very, very fearful. Right? It's so difficult to sometimes confront reality. We procrastinate, etc. Right? So it's important for us to jump onto the bandwagon, not be fearful, and confront the reality, number one. And then tell ourselves that the earth school has got something to teach me. Right? The earth school is here to teach me some lessons, some life lessons. What can I learn from this? Right? Whatever challenges come to us, of course, it's easy for me to say, right? But the scriptures explain to us that we need to look at it as, wow, this is something amazing. This is an amazing challenge for me. Let's try to see what this has in store for me. What can I learn from this experience? All right. And the mindset, as what Satya Nadella says, should be the growth mindset where we are focusing on, even if something doesn't go well, what can I learn from this? It's exactly, living that growth mindset mental model. And then when we become an observer of life, it's also living this whole feel of curiosity. Right? Of course, right now it might seem like a very, very artificial embarking of these 4 activities, right? When we face challenges. But in time to come, as you engage more and more in spiritual activities, more and more in meditation, then as what Professor Richard Davidson has mentioned, right? You will become much, much more compassionate. You will become much, much more equipoised during challenges in life, during difficulties in life, as well as during episodes of happiness in life, right? You will be much, much more calm. It's not that, when something, a life experience which really conforms with what you wanted, what your expectations are, if it comes to you, you get excited. No, no, no. You'll just remain very, very calm. And you will say that, yes, right? This is an amazing episode which is in my life. Let's see what's in store for me after this. I'll just take a pause to see if anyone has any reflections. All good?
Hi, PK. I have a question. When you talk about the art of being, the learning the art of being an observer, does it mean that you're a meek spectator in the whole journey, or is it about, just being observant of what is going on? Does it mean that you become complacent in that? You can't voice your opinion? I'm talking about in a corporate setting, like the example you gave of the marketing manager. So just by observing, how do you, conform to the ideology of the company, or how do you conform? How do you express your views and opinions? Because otherwise, if you're just being an observer, that means you're just a meek spectator, and you're keeping things to yourself. You're not voicing it. I don't know. I would need some more clarity on that example or analogy that you just shared.
Sure, sure. Yes. So when I say an observer, it means that you are making decisions as an observer, as a third party altogether, not as someone who is so invested in it. Because when we are invested in something, we will see it differently. We will not have a neutral point of view, right? Because I've invested a lot in it, it's very hard for me to, like what pharmaceutical companies will say, right? It's important for us to fail fast, right? And it's very, very difficult if you are the researcher for you to fail fast, right? The moment you realize that this is not going anywhere, I've tried my very, very best, and it is not going to be resulting in a blockbuster drug. That is where I need to become an observer of the entire situation and tell myself that I need to divorce myself from this situation. If I'm so invested in this, it will be very, very hard for me to come out of it. So when I say an observer, you are still making decisions, but you are making decisions as a neutral person who is not invested in that scenario. Is that making sense?
Thank you. Yeah, it's clear. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Right. So how do you take care of your soul? Right. So how can we become conscious enough to live a soul-aligned life? Right. We spoke about Professor Richard Davidson's research that when we engage in spiritual activities, right, it is going to be assisting us in a big way when it comes to facing life challenges, when it comes to becoming a compassionate person, when it comes to being a person who is full of empathy, becoming empathic leaders, etc. Right? So this is what his research is showing. But let's bring it down to the ground level, right? Instead of looking at just his research, how can we make this more real? Right? So look at this lady over here, right? She got a nice parrot as her pet, and she's really excited. She bought an amazing gold-plated cage for her parrot. And she has been really busy looking after the cage. Along the way, she neglected her responsibility of feeding the parrot. And within 2 to 3 days, the parrot died. Right? It's an amazing analogy because it tells us that our entire lives, we have been so focused on the cage, right? We have been so focused on looking after our bodies. Have we invested in the life force? Have we invested in taking care of the life force? Right? So no use just Of course, nourishing the body is very important. Beautifying the body is also important. But if we do not nourish the soul, right, we are not living a fulfilled life. Right? So in this particular scenario, not knowing the real identity of the soul, people spend all their lives in polishing the cage, pampering the body, and without feeding the soul. Okay. So how do we go about feeding the soul? I've explained many, many times. Let's look at Stephen Covey's 7 habits, right? The 7th habit explains this. How do you sharpen the saw? Right? Imagine, woodcutters, they're getting ready for work. They just get in and they start chopping, right? Chopping the tree trunks. Something which would have taken them 20 minutes to complete could take them more if they had not sharpened the saw. So what Stephen Covey is saying is it's important that before we engage in our regular material activities, our corporate work, our office work, our family work, our family responsibility, etc., it's important for us to put on our own oxygen mask first. It's important for us to sharpen our saw. And what does it mean by that, right? It means, number one, engaging our mind, right? Looking at the mental dimension, for example, reading, right? Writing, journaling, learning new skills, etc. Of course, when it comes to the body, it's important for us to keep ourselves healthy, right? But for the soul, right? There is a spiritual dimension to sharpening the saw too, right? And that's exactly what we have been discussing. Meditating, keeping a journal, right? We will have a separate session on journaling. It's very different from the journaling which we do in a corporate world, right? Praying, right? Taking in quality media. That's just so important. It's so difficult today. The moment you open your TikTok account or your Instagram account or your Facebook, there's just so much of distraction. And in today's class, we will actually learn how these distractions affect us. Because these distractions are a form of material energy. And material energy can be classified as energy in the mode of goodness, material energy in the mode of passion, and material energy in the mode of ignorance. Right? So these energies will affect us. Something which is in the mode of passion will make us really passionate. Something which is in the mode of ignorance will make us very, very lethargic, etc. So the external environment, the ecosystem we surround ourselves with, affects us. Once it affects us, it becomes our primary behavior. And that may one time become a lifestyle. Right? So in today's class, we'll explain more of that. I'll just take a pause here to see if this is making sense. Stephen Covey's 7th habit also discusses how we can actually sharpen the saw and, right, instead of just polishing the cage, how can we look after our soul? So I work for Harvard, right? I work for Harvard and I see, many, many articles being published in Harvard Business Review. I'm still in the office, by the way. In books like The Dopamine Nation, The Happiness Journal, so many of these books, I'm of the opinion that these great ideas are actually from the scriptures, be it from the Buddhist scriptures, be it from the Hindu scriptures, etc. And many of these consultants or authors or professors, they get these ideas from the books and they place it as hypothesis. And then they would start gathering data, right, to prove the hypothesis. And then they publish something on this. So if you read the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari When the first time I read it, I told myself, my God, this guy has stolen all the ideas from the Bhagavad-gita, and he's not even giving any reference to the Bhagavad-gita, right? So like this, as you read more and more, you realize that, wow, actually the foundation of all of these leadership principles are from the scriptures. And I'm excited to share with you that I'm actually writing a book on this, where I'm bringing modern day principles and somehow proving that these concepts were actually already spoken in the scriptures, be it Jainism, be it Hinduism, be it the Bhagavad-gita, etc. Okay, any questions before I move on?
Please share with us your book once it's ready.
Oh yeah, certainly, yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Good luck with that.
it's a shutdown at the end of this month for 10 days.
Okay.
I've like already written 54 pages. I need to write a few more, and I think I'll be done.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, that's like my passion. That gives me life. I've reached a certain phase in life where this is so important for me. This sharing is just so important for me. Okay, so let's move on. Right, it's so amazing, right? Like how many of you have gone for Franklin Covey's 7 Habit course? Okay, this is like a big thing in the corporate world, right? A lot of companies go for this. They send their leaders for this. Now let's watch one of the spiritual leaders explaining this topic further. Okay, I'll just play for a few seconds to see whether you can hear the volume. Right? Does it work? Was the volume fine?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Ancient text tells about a man who inherited a rare bird from his grandfather. He took the bird and put it in a golden cage, and every day he came and polished the cage. Day after day, the bird got weaker and weaker, until finally it was gasping, "Feed me, feed me." Finally, the bird died. This seems so obvious, but actually, we're the bird within the cage. The body is like a cage, and we're the bird within. You have to feed the spirit, because we're not matter, we're not the body, we're actually spirit. Here are the main ways to feed your spirit. The first is that sound carries consciousness. The kind of sound that you allow into your ears will either nourish or diminish your spirit. When you hear spiritual sound, your spirit is uplifted, your consciousness expands. In order to do this deliberately, you can take to the practice of spiritual mantras. Simply taking some time every day to sit down tight and hear the spiritual mantra, let it go in your ear and pervade your heart, you'll find that your life improves. You'll be spiritually uplifted. The next way to feed the spirit is to do selfless service, especially for our original divine source. When you do this kind of service, you'll find yourself immediately uplifted spiritually. That is, doing service not to get something in return, but service for service. Amazingly, this aligns us with our higher self and with our original divine source. And then there's the principle of sacred space. Make some space in your home sacred, a place where you can sit and meditate and hear from the ancient texts about higher knowledge, free from distraction, a place where you invest in yourself and your higher self. When you go to that place every day, you'll find that it becomes a deeper and deeper place for meditation and contemplation. In this way, you can feed your spirit. Please write me and tell me, what ways are you taking care of your body, mind, and spirit, keeping them in sattva or goodness so that you can live a radiant life full of spiritual happiness? Thank you very much.
Okay. So the house of happiness and satisfaction, it's important for us to cultivate gratitude for what we already have, rather than constantly striving for more. Number one. Number two is to focus on the present moment, right? Because whatever you do right now is orchestrating the future. Whatever has happened, it's an amazing lesson for us. But if we do not focus on the present, it doesn't give us confidence on how the future is going to be, right? So focus on the present moment, practicing mindfulness and awareness of where my thoughts are going, right? And it's important, as per Professor Richard Davidson, wherever the mind goes to, right, bring it back. Just keep on bringing it back, and you will realize that because of the plasticity of the mind, you will be able to control this better and better. Right? Don't be judgmental on yourself. Accept that, yes, my mind has gone somewhere else. I just need to bring it back. This whole process of bringing it back is actually like strengthening the mind muscle, providing it with fortitude, right? And then cultivate a sense of purpose and meaning in life. That's very, very important. When I ask my friends, what's your purpose in life? Many of them, in fact, most of them struggle. They struggle with this. They do not know what the purpose of life is. What is their own purpose of life? There's no one standard purpose of life, right? Everyone is supposed to come up with their own purpose of life, depending on their nature, their interests, etc. Many people struggle with this. And finally, for us to attain that inner happiness, it's important for us to engage in service, right? Service without an expectation. And finally, the Bhagavad-gita explains that it is our responsibility, our dharma, to give our best, right? When we are in our jobs, when we are householders, we have to give our best. Not giving our best is actually a sin. So we give our best, but at the same time, we should not be attached to the results, right? What we can do is just 1/3 the equation, right? We give our best. And then there are so many other elements beyond our endeavor. The scriptures explain that we are just 1/3 of the equation. God, right, the Almighty or the universe, would then orchestrate as to whether I am worthy for the results I'm expecting. If I'm worthy for the results that I'm expecting, and that's normally due to my karma, my past activities, then the third part of the ecosystem takes over, which is the material nature. And then the material nature will provide me with that benevolence, right? So we are just 1/3 of it. So don't be so attached to the results. Your work is just to give your best and then finally learn and tell ourselves, what is the earth school actually finally teaching me? It's really tough to accept this in the corporate world because we have got goals, right? But there are many great companies today, and I can name a few, right? I know of this company in India where the CEO has mandated that our work is to focus on the procedure and give our very, very best. The rest, we are not really in control of. Okay? Finally, happiness is not determined by what's happening around you, but rather what's happening inside us. Most people depend on others to give us happiness, but the truth is, it always comes from within. So with this, we complete the chapter on happiness. And now let's move on to today's chapter, which is, who's pulling my strings? Namita, are there times when you feel that, someone is just pulling your strings? Someone has got the remote control.
The remote control is with me, but I press the wrong button. So
okay, nice. Anyone else? Any other realizations on this? Who's pulling my string? So many of us will feel that sometimes things are just beyond my control. Example, in certain times of the day, you will feel very energetic. Certain times of the day, you will feel that you are in clear consciousness. In certain surroundings, you will feel and live in fresh, fully charged. And in certain atmosphere, you will feel very passionate. And while in certain surroundings, you may just feel loathsome. And certain food will make you feel in a clear consciousness. Certain food will make you full of passionate energies. And certain food will make you feel so lazy and lethargic. So in today's presentation, we'll look at what the three primary forces are which causes us to act in certain ways. Okay. So this is, in fact, if you look at the Bhagavad-gita, there are 700 verses in the Bhagavad-gita. 100 verses are just focused on this topic of the three modes of material nature. Okay. So, Krishna, who speaks the Bhagavad-gita, he has given a lot of emphasis. And if we can perfect our understanding of the three modes of material nature, then we can orchestrate our life in such a way that we can be least affected by these three modes of material nature. Okay. Right? So these are subtle energies. You can't see them. Right? So you can't really see this mode of goodness or this energy in the mode of goodness, this energy in the mode of passion. You really can't see this. And many of us may say, I cannot see these forces, and therefore, by inference, they do not exist. But let's ask ourselves, there are many such energies or forces which we can't see. For example, consciousness. Can we touch consciousness? No. Can we touch our mind? No. You can't point at it. Intelligence. Can you point at intelligence? You cannot point at it. Right? So these are all subtle energies. And it's just not in Buddhism or in Hinduism where this concept is actually found, right? This subtle energy, it has got like 45 unique names, right? Depending on which part of the world we come from, which tribes we come from, right? The Tibetans, the Christians, the Jewish, the Greek, the Europeans, the Polynesians, the tribal folks, all of them have this concept of subtle energy. So subtle energies are already well known amongst indigenous tribes, religious traditions. There's a lot that modern science does not know. And slowly, scientists are beginning to discover this. Okay. Once again, Professor Richard Davidson spoke how meditation can help us becoming more and more conscious of these energies also. Okay, so let's look at this very, famous experiment by this Japanese scientist, Masaru Emoto-san, right? He has published an amazing book on water crystals. Any of you heard of this before?
Yes, I've heard about it.
Wonderful, right?
yes.
Okay, good, right? So Mr. Emoto and his team, experimented with water samples, and these water samples were exposed to not just different types of sounds, but also different types of atmospheres, right? So some of the photographs which we'll be sharing, they're just amazing, and all of them show a response from, response of how water crystals appear. So the first experiment is in, the Shanbuishi Yushui Spring, right, in the Yamanashi Prefecture. right? So what the doctor did was, what the scientist did was collected some water samples from there, and he allowed the water crystals to appear, to form, right? Beautiful water crystals, right? And remember, the surrounding was in the mode of goodness. Very, very, very peaceful, an amazing park with water which is continuously flowing, no pollution, etc. And this is the type of crystals you get. And this is another, sample of water from a spring. Once again, fresh, clean, no pollution. The entire atmosphere is so sattvic, full of goodness, right? It just uplifts you when you go there, just like some parts of Rishikesh, right? And then this is a contaminated river, all right? It's in the mode of ignorance, so much of pollution in it, right? Hardly any nice crystals there. And then he also exposed water to different types of music, right? So when you have got classical music, once again, you get beautiful crystals, right? This is another exposure to beautiful classical music, very nice crystals. And then this is exposed to very, very melancholic classical music. Crystals are still formed, right? But not as beautiful as what it was earlier on. And then exposing it to healing music, what you actually see is, wow, a lot of these crystals are superimposed on each other, right? The crystals are just overlaying as if they were all coming together to take care of each other. Isn't it amazing? Right? And then to folk dance music, again, very beautiful. Heavy metal music, you hardly see any crystallization. Okay. And when it was exposed to, stickers with words like thank you, or when the researchers were constantly expressing gratitude to the water, this is the type of crystals which were formed. Beautiful. Right? And then this is just the exact opposite, where the researchers were just expressing harsh words like, I want to kill you, right? You make me sick, etc. And even pasting this as a sticker on the test tube, you hardly see any beautiful crystals over there. So the conclusion is, right, whatever the water was exposed to, the atmosphere the water was exposed to, the sound vibrations the water was exposed to, resulted in different types of crystallizations of the water, right? And then if you look at water, even water which is like treated by prayer, right? It will evolve from not surfacing beautiful crystals to surfacing really amazing crystals. Okay, so that's the power of subtle energy. I'll take a pause here to see if anyone have experienced this before. Not the crystallization, but a different vibe, a different feeling when you go to a different atmosphere. Ash? Alexis?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. So yeah, definitely when I am in nature, just feeling the breeze, listening to the rustle of the leaves, and just smelling the air, I definitely feel my energy is much calmer and more soothed. My anxiety or any negative feelings are much lessened. If I'm in a crowded place with a lot of people, and especially if they are not happy with each other, I can sense that energy and it affects me as well. So for me, it's very obvious, the effects. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Really appreciate it, Alexis. Anyone else? Jesse? Pratul?
I think it's always easier to pray or meditate when you're in a temple setting, for example. So I think that's one stark difference that I've observed.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. You know, my personal realization, even in a temple, sometimes when it's very, very crowded, it can affect you negatively. Even though the predominant whites are supposed to be the mode of goodness, but the people who are around you, for example, in the Hindu temples, when they are queuing up for food, sometimes there's a rush, etc. Right? Then that's when you actually feel that, wow, it is not really the mode of goodness. Okay.
Yes, I did think about that, but I felt maybe overall temples are like a positive source. So, like there are people who come with say a negative energy, but overall they're getting that more energy.
That's right. Wonderful. Yeah. So we need to be careful about who and what you invest your time in, right? The external atmosphere really affects us. So let's look at the science behind this. So once again, we have the spiritual energy and the material energy. And these are the two primary types of energies in this world, right? So the material energy and the spiritual energy. Within us, the spiritual spark, right? That is spiritual energy. But everything else around us is material energy. Okay. So what about the mind? Is the mind material or is the mind spiritual? What about the intelligence? Is it spiritual or is it material? And what about the ego? Is it material or spiritual? The easiest way to answer this is to ask ourselves, if it is spiritual in nature, then the material cannot affect it. Okay. But if it's material material in nature, then material energies can actually affect it. Okay. So essentially what it means is the material energy can affect another material entity. So the material energy, which is either in the mode of goodness, mode of passion, or mode of ignorance, they can affect our mind. And that's the reason why our mind can sometimes go berserk. Sometimes we feel so calm, right? So that's the mind. And the mind is material in nature. Similarly, the intelligence and the ego, which constitute the subtle body of ours, they are all material in nature. Then what about our soul, which is spiritual in nature? Can these material energies affect the spiritual soul? They cannot. All right? They cannot. Because the spiritual energy it's just different frequency altogether. And therefore, the material cannot affect the spiritual. But we have these coverings, the mind, the intelligence, and the false egos. They are being affected. And therefore, they surround the spiritual soul or the spirit or the soul with these elements. And therefore, you are not able to see the full qualities of the soul until and unless the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego becomes totally in the mode of goodness. Okay. A bit complicated, but as we progress further, you will get a better understanding of this, right? So once again, the spirit soul, as you see it, it's supposed to be shining, right? But why is it we cannot see it? as, why can we not see these qualities within us? It's because it's covered by this contamination going on in our mind, in our intelligence, and our false ego. Okay. Right? So earth, water, fire, air, ether, the mind, the intelligence, and false ego, they are all material energies. Okay? Only the soul is spiritual in nature. So God's material energy keeps us in check, and we remain in this material world until we are left with no more desires, except the desire to love and serve God. Excuse me. So this is an axiom, okay? Essentially, the scriptures explain to us this whole concept of reincarnation. That until and unless we have no more desires, except the desire to love and serve God, we will continue to remain in this material world. These material energies will keep on affecting us. And therefore, this material energy binds us into this material world until we are ready, until we have no more desires, and then we can actually go back to the spiritual world. And therefore, this whole concept of reincarnation, where we come back again and again and again into this earth school. It's a difficult concept, so I'll just take a pause here to see if you have any questions, and I can then elaborate further.
So I have a question about when you said that the material world does not really affect the spiritual world, but the mind is in the material world. And when we meditate, we are trying to train the mind not to be controlled, right? So in a way, when we are able to successfully reach a certain stage where the mind is not so uncontrolled, doesn't that also affect our spirit?
It does. Then what's happening is your mind, your intelligence, the ego, our senses are all exuding energy in the mode of goodness. It's no longer in the mode of ignorance. It's no longer in the mode of passion. All right. So when you engage more and more in meditation, in spiritual activities, then what is happening is your predominant mode is becoming the mode of goodness. Right? And therefore, what you will also see is that your soul qualities will become visible, more and more visible. This compassion, this focus, this clarity will become all visible to you and to others who are near you. So this engaging in spiritual activity essentially evolves our mind, our intelligence, and our ego from the mode of ignorance and passion to the mode of goodness. And I'll come to this concept of goodness, passion, etc. in just 2 minutes. Is it making sense?
Yes, so it sounds to me like they are linked. It's just that it's more coming from the spirit world, that's desire, that spirituality desire to improve on the material world in a way.
Say more.
Because I'm trying to understand what you meant by the two worlds are separate and they're not linked, because I feel like they are very much linked. Like the things in the material world, such as the mind, I feel that it is very much linked to the spiritual world as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's park this for a while, and maybe as we traverse through the topic, it might get a bit more clearer.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's just the wrong choice of words I've used, but it's important to remember that the material energy and the spiritual energies, these are two separate energies.
Right. Okay. They're separate energies. Okay.
They are separate energies. And the material energy can only affect the material organs, the material objects. It cannot affect the spiritual objects. It cannot affect the spiritual soul. Right now, we can only think of spiritual objects as being the spirit soul and God. These are the only two spiritual objects we know of, right? So the material energies, they cannot affect the spirit. What it
Can
affects
I
is,
add a
yeah,
perspective?
sure.
I feel like the mind is material because the mind helps us to perceive the material world.
Wonderful. I like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So but I feel like the mind is also spiritual in the sense that when the mind is aligned with the heart, like the mind and heart coherence, that's where you can reach the higher mind.
Yeah. So what we are then doing is you are spiritualizing the mind. You are spiritualizing the mind, but it is still not 100% spiritual. You have spiritualized the mind, all right, but it is still not of the same quality as the spirit soul. The spirit soul is completely different. And that's the reason why, at the time of death, the scriptures explain that at the time of death, the spirit soul is carried by the mind, the intelligence, and the ego to another body, right? So the soul is just waiting to get into another body. And the mind, the ego, and the intelligence will then, somehow orchestrate the type of body this spirit soul needs to go into. If our mind, if our activities, if our intelligence and our ego has been really very, very evolved in the spiritual trajectory, then, we may go back to the spiritual world altogether. Or we may be, being born in a very, very spiritual family where it becomes naturally easy for this person to take up spirituality and to continue from where this person has stopped. But if the mind, the intelligence, and the ego has been so accustomed to activities in ignorance, in the mode of ignorance, full of laziness, activities which are not seen as progressive, then what's going to happen is the soul will be waiting for a body, which is, could be in the form of an animal, etc. Okay, we'll progressively learn all of this. So it's important for us to look at the material energy as the energy which is blocking us from the spiritual world. And this material energy can be classified into three types. Number one is the mode of goodness or the sattva guna. Number two is the mode of passion or the rajas. And the mode of ignorance or the tamasic guna. Right? So if we learn the right lifestyle, which is, engaging in sattva guna, then there's a high probability that we will not be trapped in this material world in future. But if we have been practicing the wrong lifestyle, which is engaging in activities in the mode of ignorance, eating food in the mode of ignorance, being around people who are in the mode of ignorance, or working in an atmosphere which is in the mode of ignorance, for example, a slaughterhouse. Yeah, so all of these energies are actually affecting our minds, our intelligence, and our ego, right? So, yeah, I can share with you some really crazy examples. every time we go to the hospice to do some service, at the end of the service, we just sometimes feel so drained, right? We feel drained, although we are like, doing maybe the right things, but we feel drained because the entire atmosphere, right, is not in Sattva Guna, right? It's not uplifting us. We are trying to uplift the patients who are there, but they are in, probably a, mode of ignorance and goodness, ignorance and passion, and that is sometimes affecting us, right? So, yeah, just for today's class, just remember there are 3 types of energies which keep us blocked in this material world, right? Blocking us from the spiritual world. And yeah, maybe I'll just go quickly a little bit so that there's a better appreciation of this. So when we are, when our mind, our intelligence, our senses, they are all in this mode of goodness, then we will feel balance, harmony, peace, clarity. When we are in the mode of rajas or the mode of passion, then there's just so much of excitement, passion, agitation, desire. And then when we are in the mode of tamas, then it's like inertia, inactivity, negative thinking, dullness, etc. And this is interesting. If we live in an atmosphere like this, right? Pratul, what is the energy being exuded from this atmosphere?
Maybe confusion or chaos.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's mode of ignorance, right? So what's going to happen is if we work in an atmosphere like this, or if we live in an atmosphere like this, this energy of the mode of ignorance is going to be affecting our mind, our senses, our intelligence, our ego. And we will have that kind of behaviors which Pratul just mentioned, right? Which is negative energy, dullness, delusion, depression, ignorance, inertia, right? But if we can orchestrate our lifestyle, right? And so you become what you surround yourself with. Energies are really contagious. So you need to choose very, very carefully. Your environment will become you. So we saw in this particular case, the environment, the energy was affecting us, and we begin to act in the ways which Pratul has just mentioned, which is full of lethargy, energy, not clear in our consciousness, etc. And then, look at this kind of atmosphere. Again, the energy is affecting this person, and this person with this energy will also orchestrate the atmosphere around him like this. So it's like a vicious cycle, right? And then if you look at stock exchanges, the competitive atmosphere, environment, etc., it is just so full of passion, right? You become very, very competitive. And if we go to nightclubs, then nightclubs, these dingy alleys, they are in the mode of ignorance and in the mode of passion combined together. And therefore, they get us into a different mood altogether. All right? And imagine our home is like this, in contrast to this, right? If our homes are like this, bright, everything is nicely arranged, clean, nice fresh air, then the prominent atmosphere in the house is in the mode of goodness. And it affects our mind, it affects our senses, our intelligence, and then we orchestrate our behavior in sync with the atmosphere. All right? One of you just now mentioned that, when you go to the park, etc., it just gives you so much of clarity, purity, right? So it's important for us to, ensure that we are in the right atmosphere with the right people in the right jobs, etc. And of course,
I have a question.
Yes.
In a way, isn't nature also chaotic?
Nature is chaotic. Yes, nature. Okay, so nature once again is classified into the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas. Right? So it depends. Nature can be, if you go to the Himalayas, if you go to a certain park, if you go to some of the amazing parks in Japan, in Singapore, etc., then the prominent energy around there is in the mode of goodness. All right. If I go to Boat Key, the discotheques over there, the pubs over there, then that is in the mode of passion and ignorance. And it affects me. It affects my consciousness, my mind, my intelligence, etc. So nature, it depends on where you are.
Okay.
All right. So I'll take a pause here. But let's ask, our participants, our friends over here who may have already heard of this concept, like Namita.
Hi, yes, I have heard of these three concepts before, and I have a question for you.
Sure.
You earlier mentioned in one of the examples that when you do voluntary work or you go to a hospice, the energy that you get, you come back and you feel drained. So that is a bit confusing to me because, you're doing something great. It is for a great cause. It is good karma. You're giving it back to the society.
Yeah.
So in what context does it impact you or your body or, mentally? How does it drain you? I know the whole idea of seeing elderly people being in that, terminal illness or whatever it could be. I mean, it's not a very positive state, but then what you are doing is for a good cause. So shouldn't that be uplifting you versus bringing you down or you feeling drained after the visit?
Yes, very good question. I need to be spiritually strong for that. I need to be so strong that this doesn't affect me. And there are times when I do not sharpen my saw, I do not sharpen my axe, and I just go in like that without even chanting, without even, I can only give what I have. If I were to squeeze a bottle, a packet drink, right? If it's an orange drink, when I squeeze it, what do you get? You get orange coming out. So similarly, if I'm not in the right consciousness, I will not be able to give this to them. And there's a higher potency of me absorbing the energy of that place. Yeah.
That's deep, yeah.
That's deep. Yeah. The act itself is altruistic, but if you are not in the right consciousness, it can affect us.
Get it.
Yeah. So it's important for us to sharpen our axe and ensure that, before you think about being capable enough to give to others, you need to ensure that you have enough oxygen for yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Ash, YK, Jesse? It's a heavy topic, but I think, we should all be excited because we have just learned something new, which we never knew about previously. Right? Or maybe we knew a little bit about it, but now this is the actual science behind it. And you know what? I've been listening to a few podcasts the last few days from leadership gurus, and they say that it starts with, number one, ensuring that your desk is clean, that your bed is nicely set up before you go to, before you engage in anything else. So ensure that the entire atmosphere is clean before, otherwise the material nature is exuding a different energy which may not be conducive for your spiritual growth. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of today's class. Thank you very much. And we will continue from, where we stopped today and, try to shed more light on this topic. All right. Thank you very much, Ellie, Namita, Alexis, Sinyu, YK,
Thank you.
Pratul, Maif,
Thank you.
and Jessie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye. And happy holidays to all of you.